Okay, hi everyone. This is Lante's Weekly Wisdom special session, the second special session for July. And it's part two of what I shared with you in our last session, which was how the warrior archetype, which is a preparation archetype, can help us really bring out to the full who we are by healing our own unresolved wounds. And just to remind you, this week's session is about the second preparation archetype, which is the orphan. Let's give you a brief reminder of the key points of the warrior in terms of its strengths, okay? Well, its first strength is its courage, as you would expect from a warrior. In this case, it's the courage to stand up for what we believe in, so we can walk away from what's not without any feelings of guilt or what are they going to say. Just, this is not for me, this is not worth me standing up and fighting for. It's not really that important for me, so walk away. Strength number two, discipline. Discipline, yeah, it's not a word that's very popular today, but if you want to be successful, you need discipline, one of the harsher realities in life. Discipline to prepare for our work, for our meaningful work, for our challenges, so we have everything we need for a successful outcome, okay? This is why I tend to say to you, I don't think the law of attraction works in the way that most people understand it to work. The third thing is that it has the skill to do our work to the very best of our ability, so that we give ourselves, again, the very greatest chance of success through our skill. One is through the discipline of our preparation. Two is through the way we take a talent and we practice it and we practice it until we get so good at it, we become very skilled at it and others recognize it as our area of expertise that they can enjoy with us. So that was our last session's three main skills or gifts, if you like. We call them quest gifts in archetypal psychology. Today we're looking at the orphan. Now, if you listen to this as a replay, you will notice that I give you an opportunity to stop the replay for a while to do an exercise. Now, if you want to do that with me, stop this replay here and now and go get your notebook and a pen or a pencil or some way to write on the screen. It doesn't matter where you do it, so that you can do these exercises and gain the benefit from them while I'm sharing them with you. Remember that this was an ebook that I am turning into an online course. So what I've tried to do before this session started, and I've got to pull it up, was to actually cut out all the bits where I say, hi, welcome back, this is the third module in the course. In the last video we did this, now we're going to look at that. So I've cut all of that out. And if I've missed any of that, you'll hear me going quickly scanning through the copy till I get to a part that's where I can share it with you. But for now, on with today's preparation archetype, which is our orphan. So this is actually going to be the third module in this course. The first is an introduction to the course itself and to me. The second is the warrior, which I shared a bit of you with you in our last session. The third is the orphan. Okay. Now, this is where we're going to see ourselves through the eyes of our inner orphan. Its quest, how it was wounded, how it heals, and how it helps you as a social entrepreneur. Remember that my target is social entrepreneurs. So in this, read your meaningful work. Okay. Now, there are great strengths hidden in the wounds we carry, and they're just what our enterprise needs to be successful. And as we replace our wounded behavior with healed behavior, each quest archetype actually gets to reveal more of these strengths to us. So that's why today we're showing you how to replace your inner orphan stressed flight response with a more effective one that's going to move it up that wounded, healed continuum that I shared with you in our last session. Because we want our inner orphan to have full access to our interdependent self-reliance, our empathy, and our realism. Aha! So we never forget that we're the ones who create our safety. No one else can do that for us. And having full access means working through its healing cycle from I'm wounded to trusting someone enough to start talking to them and saying that, oh, you're wounded too. And then sharing enough with them to arrive at, oh, we can help each other heal. Put simply, our inner orphan finds a home in the world as we form bonds with others through the sharing of our early wounds, and it expands that home through the community it and we develop by healing those wounds together, because we can help each other heal, okay? So when our inner orphan calls us to our quest, as yours has done, it's because we're ready to establish our place in the world by letting others help us and being open to the bonds and community that this willingness to trust creates, because together we're stronger than we can ever be alone. So, skipping a piece and moving on to the next short teaching video. Our community of mutual trust that we build as we heal our wounded inner orphan isn't just the perfect environment for us to heal, it's also the perfect environment for others to heal in, which is why it's just what you need to create the success with your meaningful work you know you're capable of. That sounds great, doesn't it? So why on earth would we refuse our quest, as many of us do? I know that I refused mine for quite a while. Well, because the opposite of trust is a feeling of being exploited and victimized, and it's the disappointment and even betrayal that we can feel because of this that creates our early wounds. Now, given enough of these, we learn to mistrust others and our own judgment and abilities, which is going to put some serious brakes on our success and progress with our goals, isn't it? If we don't trust ourselves. So if you know that you've been looking for something outside of you to solve the roadblocks that you've been coming up against and the underachievement they've been creating within you, your inner orphan might well have had difficulty trusting your ability to resolve your own emotional wounds, and it might be what's been causing your roadblocks. So for the rest of today, we're going to look at how and why that might have happened. I want to tell you now that that's about to become a thing of the past because of doing the work with me here today. Now, if you've taken something that I mentioned in last week's session, which was the VIA Strength Survey that I told you about, you're already well equipped to turn your mistrust into trust, because you know you're now equipped with at least 20 strengths that you can start using whenever you need. 20 strengths, and I bet that some of them you didn't know you had. Okay, your orphan's quest tools are not only just as powerful as those VIA strengths, they'll help you find the easiest and most enjoyable way to heal more of your inner orphan with the interdependent self-reliance that supports community, the empathy that supports trust, and a well-developed sense of realism that supports more of your unimpeded progress. And that reminds you, whenever you need it, the key abilities you need to succeed are always available to you because they're innate. They may be latent, hidden. You may not know you have them, but they're there. And when you're ready to spot them, you can always develop them. So you can use them to move successfully through whatever difficulties your quest presents, because you're using your mind as a tool instead of as a weapon against you. And we spoke about this last session. So make friends with your orphans, your healed orphans in particular, empathy and compassion, and make sure you always blend it with a healthy dose of realism, because that combination is central to your ability to build and create meaningful work that creates a real difference. And the sooner you do, the better, because until this happens, there's always a part of us that's going to struggle. So, compassion without realism makes it impossible to build a community of equals where everyone shares the same goals of trust and interdependence. Okay, you come to me for help, I come to you for help. You trust me, I trust you. We know that we're greater together than we can ever be alone. And so we become interdependent, because this demands that each member take full responsibility for what they're for what they're contributing to that interdependent community. Now, you'll struggle because in your rush to offer the help you know you can give, you don't stop to ask yourself if the other person will use what you're giving them to empower themselves or others, or if they'll abuse it, simply because your compassion isn't blended with realism. You're ready to make a change in the world, whether you're a social entrepreneur or not. You're here in this community because you're ready to do that, whether it's in a big way or in a small corner of the world. It really doesn't matter, because tiny stones create big ripples when the thrower knows how to use that stone for maximum effect. Now, as someone who's answered the call to your quest to really make a difference in the world, your inner orphan is calling you to use your quest gifts wisely so that you too can create a big ripple through what your inner orphan calls interdependent self-reliance. Okay? All right, moving on to how your orphan was wounded. Now, in this video, now's the time that I want to show you how trying to use your compassion and empathy without realism can easily make things harder for you than they need be. So we're going to go into this in just a little bit more detail, because it will make things harder for you than they need be because of your wounds. So it's time to look at your wounds. As a social entrepreneur, or as someone who wants to make a difference, you want to empower people in some form. So you want to work with clients and with individuals who are sufficiently in touch with their own power to recognize and benefit from yours. And that's not going to be possible without balancing your desire to help with your realism, so we can generate the income we need to stay in business for long enough to really make a difference, okay? Our realism reminds us that we can't help everyone. We can only work with those who are ready to be an active partner in their own empowerment. So how do your clients demonstrate their readiness for the work you do? How do you know if you can help them or not? Well, let's look at what certain caring professionals do. Psychologists use a questionnaire that they need you to answer, okay? And we say, if you can't commit to answering this question, then you aren't ready for the work we do. It's as simple as that. Hypnotherapists will traditionally ask smokers for their cigarettes as proof that they're ready to quit. I learned about this 30 years ago when a girlfriend of mine went to a hypnotherapist to give up smoking, and she said the most difficult thing was actually when the hypnotherapist said, "Give me your cigarettes," and she had to actually take her pack out of her bag and give it to the hypnotherapist. But that was the test that the hypnotherapist used to say, you're ready, you're not ready. Debt coaches will often ask potential clients to find ways to generate the money they need to pay their fees. And then they say to them, go away, think about what you need to do. raise the money, then come back when you have it. It can sound pretty uncaring, but it's a way of proving to yourself that when you put aside your fears and your wounds, you can actually do it. It's not difficult for you to do it. So the truth is that the more you heal your wounds, the more powerful a force for good you are. There's no way around that. So remember that the Oxford English Dictionary defines empathy as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It says absolutely nothing about letting their difficulties create difficulties for you. Now, as someone who wants to make a change in the world, your ability to recognize this is absolutely essential. And it may sound strange, but your inner orphan's empathy is just the job to do this, because it's not about seeing someone else's pain, understanding it because you felt it too, and thinking, wow, that person really needs my help, which is the trap newbie entrepreneurs tend to fall into. It's first about seeing and accepting your pain so you can experiment with ways to heal it, because then knowing how you protect yourself from old wounds and the lengths you go to do this makes you a much more powerful support for your clients. You go much deeper with them, they are much happier, they get much better results, and everyone wins. So what I want to emphasize here is this: knowing and accepting your pain first is essential to ensuring a definitive change for the better in your relationship with your inner saboteurs. Because remember, we're looking at our preparation archetypes to find ways in which they can help us reduce the way our inner saboteurs hijack us and hijack our vision, hijack our talents, our skills and experience. So essential and definitive are the operative words here, because if you try changing your relationship with an inner saboteur and then give up halfway through, you've shown them that you'll give up again if they push you hard enough. And achieving lasting change suddenly becomes much more difficult. It's not what you want to do. So it's time to learn how your inner orphan was wounded, so you can spot where its wounds are still active in you and start healing them. Now, with the time, I can't give you a comprehensive list. It's just a beginning, but it will give you some very helpful insights, hopefully. Now, let's go back to a simple truth. All change begins with a clear starting point. So knowing where and to what extent you're wounded now will make it easier to see what you've achieved when you want to check in with your progress, which is absolutely great for your orphan's self-trust, because it struggles with it. But back to our wounds, okay? The truth is that everyone around us is constantly working through their own wounds. So our parents are always flawed to some degree. They can't be anything else, because they too were working through their own wounds, and they may still be. And it's these flaws and wounds that teach us the pain of feeling alone and let down in some way. So we learn how to protect ourselves against this pain over time, without realizing how this fear of being hurt stops us from reaching out to others in a way that would heal our pain. And the more hurt and disillusioned we become because we're not reaching out to others, we're focusing on the pain and the protection, the more we lose faith in ourselves and the more of a wounded orphan we become. No matter how talented we are, we'll end up struggling and underachieving in some way, because, again, the simple truth is that we can't make the most of our talents, our gifts, our passions and skills unless we trust ourselves and others. Now, as adults, this wound reveals itself in many ways. One, through the push-pull relationships we have with others. We might initially, for example, welcome their offer to help us and then push them away as our mistrust takes hold. 2, we can choose relationships with those who enable us in our mistrust, partners, friends, work colleagues. 3, if we learn that passion always leads to pain, we take jobs for the money, security, or prestige and we end up being bored and frustrated instead of passionate and energized. 4, I think we're at now. Slowly but surely, we set limits for what we can achieve. We criticize ourselves, other people, and organizations, and then we sit back in rather a helpless way and say, but what can I do? Well, the great late Anita Roddick had a great comeback to that when she said, if you think that as an individual you can do nothing, just spend a night with a mosquito. And I spent a night with a mosquito last night. Yeah, and I have the bites on my thighs to prove it. So no matter how highly developed your skills, your wounded orphan will always leave you feeling unworthy in some way. And it's a wound that you can carry with you throughout your life. So, getting us to chase the feelings of safety that we didn't get but needed as a child because of our flawed and wounded parents, and also the flaws and wounds of those other adults around us, lets our saboteurs erect some serious obstacles for the social enterprise you founded on a powerful vision. And it's going to really get at you through that vision, because where's the proof? What do I have that I can trust? You're going into unproved territory. All sorts of things will trigger a wounded orphan here from your powerful vision. So our wounded orphan sees our smallest failing as proof of our inadequacy and the smallest mistake as a catastrophe. It can, in fact, so powerfully undermine our trust in ourselves and others that we start to question our every move and thought, instead of building the resilience we really need to keep going when things get tough. So, if as children we learn to get what we want with a little manipulation, we will quite simply continue to use it as adults, perhaps by pretending we're poorer than we are, we're more tired or busy than we actually are, to avoid a difficult discussion. And even when we know that no one's fooled by our flattery, we still might use it. But this is a lose-lose situation, because in using flattery, we miss an opportunity to build trust, the trust that creates community, that heals us and others. So for the inner orphan, more than our outer environment being unsafe, it's our thoughts and emotions, our inner environment, if you like, that's unsafe. The Beatles might have sung "All You Need Is Love," but our wounded orphan tells that what we need is trust. That's why this archetype's wake-up call to its quest and to its big vision is to face our painful realities, not to stay stuck in them, but to get up close and personal with them and then shift to our strengths. So onto our inner orphan's quest tools, because that's what's going to help us shift most easily to our strengths. Now, first of all, I want to look at what's called the Pareto principle. So what I want to say here is, if in the past you learned that it's not helpful to look back, I want you to be open to how a quick look over your shoulder can give you just what you need to reconnect with your trust in your own abilities and move forward with confidence. So, are you ready to focus on your strengths in a way that helps you stop playing host to your inner saboteurs? Well, before we do that, let's start with reminding ourselves of what our orphan's quest tools are. We've already mentioned them, but now let's make it absolutely clear. The first tool is the interdependent self-reliance that leaves us with enough trust in others and ourselves to build enriching relationships, enriching families, businesses, and communities. 2, it's the empathy to see that while we might have come by our wounds in very different ways to everyone else around us, they all leave our inner orphans feeling not good enough. And 3, the realism to recognize that if our wounds create the same result, there's no need to fear others because they're like us and we're like them. I want to remind you that one of the secrets of success in anything is to recognize your weakness, but focus on your strengths. As I said a few moments ago, and the Pareto principle can be a great help in this. How? Well, if your inner saboteur's mind games typically leave you needing time to recover before you can get back to business as usual, well, then this principle helps you set a clear limit on how much time you allow those same saboteurs to hijack your thoughts. How? By letting it use no more than 20% of your thinking time and energy. That way, you've still got 80% for your strengths. Sound good? Okay, well, you can set this sort of time limit, or you might use a time limit in another way, which is to say to an inner bully in full flow, you've got 2 minutes to tell me everything I've done wrong here. After that, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Okay, that's another time limit that you can set on your inner saboteur, and you move on after those 2 minutes. If it ignores you, you just tell it, thank you, I'm not listening. Don't get angry with it. Don't get sarcastic. Firm, assertive, but calm. We go into much more detail on how best to respond to an inner saboteur that's doing this with us in another course. That's where I give you all the tools you need to make a spectacular and lasting change in your relationship with it. But for now, aim to gradually build your resilience against your 3 saboteurs, particularly the 2 that are most active in moments of change: the inner bully and the boundaries thief, who are very interested in what you're doing right now in this course. Use the Pareto principle to help you build up to the level of successful, really successful entrepreneurs and leaders. What they do is establish their real weakness and then, or weaknesses, and then dedicate all, and I seriously mean all, their thinking, creativity, and energy to making the most of their strengths, because that's how we all make the greatest contribution through our work. Successful entrepreneurs and leaders know it and own it. So, recognize how much of your thoughts you're giving your inner saboteurs to hijack you. Remember to stay as neutral as possible. Don't judge it when you spot the hijacking, because knowledge is power, so there's nothing to judge here. Then commit to reducing their freedom by 5% over the next week, and every other week until you get it down to just 20% of your time being taken up by the inner bully and the inner boundaries thief. 20% or even lower, depending on how wounded you feel you are. Now, the next stage, or the next part of this inner orphans quest tools and how to use them and make the very best effect, is a little thing called metacognition, or as I call it, the amazing metacognition. Yes, I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I am completely passionate about it. And I really, really hope that you will be too once you see the results you get when you start using it. Now, it takes resilience. It takes you to be totally committed to this, but it brings staggering results. For one thing, the time it takes you to recover from a saboteur's mind game can be reduced from hours to 0 with a little practice. So let's again define metacognition through the Oxford English Dictionary, where it is given as awareness and understanding of one's own thoughts and thought processes. Now, the simplest way to do this is to listen to your thoughts with all the curiosity of a researcher who wants to see what's growing in her petri dish. She created a nice batch of bacteria and she wants to see how they're growing, for example. And instead of being disgusted with them, she goes, oh, wow, look at how that's growing. Now, this reaction to an inner bully's antics actually uses your mind and thoughts as a tool instead of as a weapon against you. The tool that gets an inner saboteur to stop harassing you and hijacking you, at least for a while. So unlike you, your inner researcher is fascinated by your saboteur's mind games. She's absolutely crystal clear about her primary role, which is to get the data you'll need to create the big picture, so that then and only then you can decide what information contained in those mind games will support you to take vision-led action and which to dump. Okay, so what's going to be useful and what not, but you only do it after you've got all the information you need to give you a reliable big picture. Okay, so there's an exercise here which I'm going to skip, but you might like to do later on. So if you listen to this replay, for example, and I've just skipped, I am actually going to read it out to you. So this is going to be supplied in a PDF, and it's an exercise in 3 phases. In the first one, you list what's in your petri dish of mind games. I'll explain that for you. If you have trouble staying neutral about the idea of your petri dish, just remember that judging does not help at all. It's just an inner saboteur mind game, another one to distract you from changing the status quo of your relationship with them. Okay, so remember that as a researcher, you are crystal clear about your need to gather all the data first before doing anything with it. In the second exercise, you'll see who uses what mind game, okay, and which of them use the same one. That's so, because it's always good to know the most popular games of your saboteurs, because working on those first gives you the biggest win. All right. In the third stage of the exercise, I'll ask you to set your timer for 3 minutes. So I use my mobile phone for this, to focus on what empowering knowledge you think those mind games actually might contain, because later on you'll use them as a tool. Okay. Be prepared to be surprised in this phase, because you might not have spotted some of them before. There might be more empowering knowledge than you think is possible. The timer, I must admit, is there to stop you from overthinking phase 3, because I don't want you to run the risk of ending up down that rabbit hole of self-criticism. The rabbit hole is deep and long and windy, and it's going to be difficult for you to get out of. Okay, it's not what your inner orphan wants or needs right now. It needs you to stay in trusting and strength mode. And remember that what's important today is to start the process, absolutely not to finish it. Clients often find that their brains need time to adapt to this way of thinking. So when they come to this third stage of the exercise, their brains often go blank, and their very start to slow, and they start out thinking, I can't think of anything, I know I have. But then something clicks in, their brain gets up to speed, and they get up to speed too, and start seeing lots of ideas. Okay, so let's look at now our orphans' healing phases. So, changing your relationship with your inner saboteurs means making a rock-solid commitment to reducing the time you let your enterprise or your meaningful work or your passion be hijacked by them. Okay? That clear? It's so important. I can't stress it enough. It's the only way to increase the time you actually get to invest in your strengths, this commitment, and it must be unbreakable. If you slip up, just slip back in and pick it up where you left off. Okay? Don't give up. So let's take a moment to look at the role of celebration in this commitment and in this change you're making with your inner saboteurs. Now, as your orphan's actions and thoughts become more healed, celebrate. It doesn't have to be much. For me, it can often be a square of 85% dark chocolate or a 3-minute boogie to the brilliant Stevie Wonder, particularly his 1980s, his 1970s tracks and albums, which all the experts say was his heyday. He certainly, I certainly have genius albums of his from that period. Now, celebration's a powerful and very practical way to expand on your inner orphan's self-trust. Remember, this is important for you. And if you treat yourself less kindly than you tend to treat others, you're going to find this much easier to do with a trusted friend. So ask them to help you focus on no more than 3 ways each week that you can be kinder to yourself. Keep them simple, not big ways, small ways, okay? I'm going to eat healthy food, or even easier, I'm going to eat at a set time. When I find myself criticizing myself, I'm going to stop. I'm just going to interrupt it. Okay? Don't choose big things. An important part of being kind is, of course, giving yourself permission to accept and take pride in your achievements. So one of your 3 things will be, I'm going to celebrate my achievements. I'm going to not say yes, but, or no, it's not really much when people compliment me. I'm going to say thank you. No more, because we might fall down the rabbit hole of self-criticism again. We're just going to say thank you. Really simple things, okay? And because don't forget that your celebration is all the sweeter when it's shared. So include your friend in your celebration. Inner saboteurs create difficulties for us at its simplest level when our unresolved wounds get in the way of creating a loving, self-compassionate, and reality-checked relationship with ourselves. So everything you do to build this, no matter how small or silly it might seem to you now, changes the balance of power with your saboteurs in your favor. Sound good? Your inner bullies or boundaries thief might try to get at you when you start making changes, particularly when they spot how serious you're being about this rather unusual behavior to suddenly start being kinder to yourself. And if this happens, just use your orphan's realism to find an appropriate response. Now, I know that this can be difficult because it's where 90% of us actually go completely blank. But giving yourself permission to receive compliments and making a mental note of the ones you receive from others gives you actually a ready supply of responses for when you need to celebrate what you achieved instead of judging what you failed to do, okay? So using them as soon as you need them cuts out an awful lot of time that you unnecessarily play host to an inner saboteur's mind games. Because you can just say, when your inner bully, for example, starts up and starts telling you that you've done it wrong, you shouldn't be doing it, you'll only fail, you can say, I hear you, but you know, Monica said that she thought I did really well and I choose to believe her. Now, trusting your own ability to feel safe might be one of the greatest challenges your orphaned entrepreneur has, but never forget that your wounds make you very creative. Your wounds have been with you almost since the time of your birth, so you are, whether you know it or not, very creative. So if you can find all manner of ways you've been using to protect yourself from your early pain, you can certainly find 3 ways to nurture your ability to feel good about yourself and feel safe in your own skin now. And you don't need to look any further than what makes you feel good about yourself. Celebrating your achievement in anything, especially if you've struggled to achieve it, boosts your trust in yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of your safety. So moving on. At the very start of today's session, we looked at how the healing cycle of your orphan creates a ripple of benefits. Well, now it's time to look at the 3 healing phases through the statements that define them. So when you come to develop mindset shifts for each of the 3 healing phases, you'll know exactly what to focus on. And because of that, your shifts will benefit enormously. So, healing phase 1 is where we learn to acknowledge the truth of our situation and feel the pain of our abandonment, our victimization, our powerlessness perhaps, or our loss of faith in people and institutions in authority. So at this stage, it doesn't take much to see it's all about me. So our statement is, I'm alone. That's our first healing phase, to get from I'm alone, there's no one I can trust. The second healing phase is where our orphan has found a few people she can trust. And so she starts giving herself more permission to accept help from others. And in starting to use her empathy, she's noticed that we're all wounded. So at this stage of our healing, our statement becomes, it's safe to reach out. I might be healed. I might be wounded. I might be in a great deal of pain. I might feel alone, but I know that there are people that I can reach out to in safety. In the third and final phase of our healing, we find ourselves going beyond all of that to making an empowering contribution while we're still continuing to heal our wounds, because in accepting that we're all wounded, our orphan has been able to build a community based on trust, because she knows that we're stronger together. So, one thing you need to know is that in the 3 healing phases of every preparation archetype, if you aren't able to complete some part of them, it will mean that you lack some skills to develop, in the orphan's case, the relationships you want and need, both with yourself. Excuse me, I'm going to take some water. Both with yourself and others. Now, but the thing about that is, if you've already had very successful and emotionally intimate relationships, in spite of your wounds and needing a bit more healing in this area, just think how much more successful and satisfying they'll be when you've got the full set of skills completed for each phase. Now, that's something to really reach out and get help with, isn't it? It's something to take a risk with. Okay. So this doesn't mean that you can't use any of your top skills from the VIA Strengths Survey, because you can. And if you haven't already done it, I will give you the link to it again when I post this replay. What does work, though, is that learning how to heal now with your quest skills makes it much, much easier to heal successfully later through your VIA strengths and any other strengths you notice as you work through, or as you just work, go through your day, because you've already got a tool that works. Okay, so start with your orphans quest tools and then branch out. Once you've developed the quest tools in a way that you know work for you, then you can branch out as much as you like, because you know your basic tool works. Okay, so let's look at the mindset shifts that trigger your orphan's healing. Now, one of the things you can do that's very, very effective to heal your wounded inner orphan is to use your inner healed caregiver to make sure that your orphan feels loved, accepted, and valued, because this is what gives her or him the sense of community it needs to feel safe. Now, there are various mindset shifts you can make to help heal an archetype's wounded behavior. And this can often be enough to set in motion a deep healing that your vision will love, and so will you, because you might not see it clearly until you look back over your shoulder to see where you've come from. But if you do that, then you can often see, wow, that mindset shift is what made the difference. So for the orphan, this means shifting from a phase 1 situation where you see everything and everyone as being a bearer of the pain you need to protect yourself from, to seeing them as opportunities to come out of the hiding and isolation, to bond enough with others to see that they're just as wounded as you are. It might mean shifting out of a phase 2 situation where you've got one foot in your newly created or being created or budding community, and one in isolation because you don't feel ready yet to trust and start the bonding process that's going to give you the sense of safety and belonging that you will need to put both feet in community and have the sense of safety and belonging that you long for. So your move to "it's safe to reach out" might see you deciding to trust someone not to let you down when they offer to help you. Or it might mean shifting out of a phase 3 situation. And this is where you might have previously withheld trust, and you go from that to reality checking why you've withheld trust, checking the individual or the group's past behavior so that you might be able to see that actually there's very little or absolutely no reason to mistrust them at all. So you can welcome them into your community because you know that together we're always stronger. Now, here are some mindset shift suggestions to start you off. Later on, you can develop your own that will be helpful for you right now where you are on that healed, on that wounded to healed continuum of each archetype. So phase 1 of your inner orphan's healing is where your theme is "I'm alone." So you might at one point need to shift from I won't ask them for help because they'll only let me down, to going through the mindset shift that says, well, if I allow myself to feel the pain of my old wounds, in the knowledge that this has been clearing the blocks that's been stopping me from moving forward in my life, well then they've shown me that I can trust them in the past, so I can trust them with this now. In phase 2, where your theme's "it's safe to reach out, it's safe to trust," you might need to shift your thoughts from "I don't trust them" to something that's closer to, well, actually, nothing in their behavior suggests that they can't deliver what they promise, so I choose to trust them to do their very best and keep me informed of any unforeseen problems if they come up. So reality checking and reaching out and risking trusting and being disappointed or let down, because we know that we don't need to constantly protect ourselves from our pain anymore. In phase 3, where your themes were stronger together, you might find that this sort of shift might be helpful, where you go from they're hopeless at this and never meet their deadlines to, well, they are great at this, but they sometimes take on more than they can do. So I just need to be aware that they don't do that now. Okay? So this is where, if you're listening to this in the replay, you can pause this video for 3 minutes while you make a quick note of the behavior your wounded orphan's still using. List one behavior for your phase 1 healing phase, one for your phase 2, and one for phase 3. Okay? Once you've done this, make a note of a small mindset shift you think you might be able to take that would support you to shift from the wounded to the healed phase behavior in the relevant phase. Don't judge them. Remember not to judge. Just suggest something you think might work based on your experience with your saboteurs, particularly with your inner bully and boundaries thief. Okay? Remember that until you're what I call an expert shifter, only small shifts work. Anything else might create the doubt and uncertainty that your inner bully is only too happy to use against you. So start small and work your way up. That way you'll get constant small hits of satisfaction, which add up to an important change and lots of satisfaction for you as you see what you've achieved. Now, the time limit's there to protect you from overthinking your answers. 3 minutes are going to be just long enough for you to complete the exercise by making a quick note of the first thing that comes up as you work through each step. Okay. Now, if in that time you didn't manage to complete the exercise, don't worry, or you didn't get your mindset shifts quite as you wanted them, it's really not a problem because you can refine them at the end of this video at another time. While you're actually using them, things will come to you. Trust your intuition here. What comes is usually what you need. So working to get them, what's important, as I said, is not that you complete the exercise, but that you start the exercise. Because working on them and working to get them as you want them instructs your brain to create a dedicated neuron pathway for each shift. So whenever it spots you thinking the same old wounded thought, it will gradually over time automatically follow it with the new empowering mindset shift that you've just developed. Okay. Now, as I said, it won't shift. It won't happen the first time you use the shift or the 10th. For that, you need to use it as consistently as possible to form your new neuron pathway, which carries the automatic behaviors for your new way of thinking or behaving. And thanks to your inner orphan, you have the realism to know what it takes to do just that, to consistently stand up for the thoughts you believe will support your success. And you also have the discipline to use the same mindset shift over and over again until your new neuron pathway lets you know that it's now automatic, because you don't have to think about it. It automatically clicks in. And what happens if you slip into your old thinking? Well, like every new habit, you slip up. Okay, you just need to get back on that proverbial horse as quickly as you can. That's all. The longer you wait, the easier it is for an inner bully to get you believing you've failed. And that belief's going to be much harder to recover from than the occasional slip up you make. There's not very much certainty for a hero on a quest. You might already know this, but one thing we can be certain of is that we will slip up from time to time. The question is, do you want to make it a slip up that gets big enough to sink you, or that stays small enough for you to just give a quick tweak to and bring it back on course? Okay, so if you haven't done so already, learn to see your inevitable slip-ups as a mistake that you and your enterprise can easily recover from, because the alternative, seeing it as a personal failure, can sink you in the right circumstances. Now, we might not always have a shift statement ready for when we need it. Sometimes we're simply too stressed. And this preparation archetype, the orphan, may not be healed enough to recognize the need to trust that what you're trying to do will actually work. And in this case, you won't be able to make use of its planning and preparation skills. Okay, so just remember that if we want to change our relationship with an inner saboteur, we have to commit to exploring the many benefits that build when we use them. And the best way to do that is get into the habit of choosing and using healthy mindset shifts as often as you can. Preparing a few alternatives, as you've already started doing, and developing others as you need them, is a perfect way to start. Einstein said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So what's also perfect in by way of preparation is when they're so simple, they roll off your tongue as you say them, and they do that because you've said them so many times. You don't have to think about them. They're easy to remember, again, because you notice that they roll off your tongue. And the third thing that makes them perfect is you can say them to yourself calmly and confidently whenever you need them, and they become a sort of NLP anchor for you to come out of the stress response that's just been triggered in you and back into calmness and clarity. When we say them as though we mean them, not we just churn them out. I'm going to rephrase that. When we say them not as though we mean them, but because we mean them, that's important. And that's when the magic happens. Just as we know that it's in the hidden 90% of an iceberg that makes the 10% we actually see possible, so does our mindset shift preparation make the result we want possible, because being clear about our choice of shift and committed to that result gives our brains the permission and time to present us with ways to make it a reality. When you don't defend what is important to you, you say no to it. When you don't stand up for it, when you don't use your quest skills to protect it, that triggers cortisol and adrenaline to flood your body and take your modern brain offline. So you're reduced to trying to solve problems with your reptilian brain, which manages only physical survival and maintenance. This brain's functions are mainly unconscious and automatic, which means they're highly resistant to change. So is this really the brain you want running your enterprise, your meaningful work? Of course not. Your orphan needs your modern brain to be in charge. The neocortex, or the prefrontal cortex, as it's sometimes called, because it enables sound decision making and your consciously chosen behavior. Thanks to its critical thinking abilities, which are very sophisticated, it supports you to see the consequences of your thoughts and actions and plan for the future your vision needs you to create. So, it's time to learn about the strengths your inner orphan brings as it calls you to create a community where your vision as a social entrepreneur or your meaningful work can thrive. And this is the last section of this module. So let's sum up with all the ways your healed or healing orphan can make a big difference to the change you're able to make in the world. Now, for you to thrive and for your vision to thrive, you don't have to wait for your orphan's healing to be completed. You've already seen and experienced how using its healing behavior brings some pretty powerful results if you've worked through the exercises that come in this module. So let's look at some things to recognize, use as much as possible, and celebrate. Okay, your orphan's ability to check facts and keep you real sets you up for success, especially when you use it with your warrior's training and planning abilities. And it will help you with the clarity to see what stands in the way of your vision and mission as a social entrepreneur, so you can start clearing. Remember the Oxford Dictionary, English Dictionary's definition of empathy? The orphan's ability to understand and share the feelings of others, and its realism to help you set clear boundaries between what help you will give and what you won't to others. And it's this skill and the lack of it that causes many new social entrepreneurs and caring professionals who leap to offer their help indiscriminately to end up by being burned out and failing. Okay, using your inner orphan's healing love and sense of community, because it's learned how losing your trust in others so early in life has helped you discover the benefits of taking full responsibility for your happiness and yourself, which is something to seriously celebrate, okay? So use your healing orphan's love of community, because it really has learned how this loss has helped you discover the benefits of taking full responsibility for yourself and your happiness. As orphans, we see much more easily than others how our scars become part of our authentic power, and know that we're all the more inspiring because of them. And our ability to inspire others is just what we need to attract clients, supporters, colleagues, and ambassadors to our meaningful work. So again, this is something many new entrepreneurs struggle with until we learn to hand over the responsibility for our inspiration and our ability to inspire to our inner orphan, particularly when it's healed. Now, again, your inner orphan's growing skill with intimacy and trust is also exactly what your enterprise and vision need for your success. Having healed its trust issues right up to the point where it prefers community to isolation makes it a powerful advocate for teamwork and collaboration, both with others and your preparation archetypes. So, for example, your inner warrior can help you realize your goals and vision. Your inner caretaker can show you what healthy self-care habits you'll need to stay the course. And your inner innocent can bring you the unfailing trust and optimism that will help you resolve the difficulties your vision and quest present you with from time to time. It's recognition that your wounds have helped you grow, learn, and mature makes you a perfect role model for others who have difficulty understanding that the harder they grasp reality now and lean into that pain so that they can come through it, the easier it is to shape their reality in the future. Well, that's it for the orphan. There's still a bit more work to do on this particular module, but it's fine-tuning now. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot from it. And if you want to listen to the replay and do the exercises, I thoroughly recommend that you do them, because they're exercises I've used for years and clients have found them very helpful. That's the last special session for July. We will not have any in August because we're taking a month's holiday. But I will see you with the Master again on Wednesday for our weekly wisdom call. But that's it from me. So until Wednesday, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will post tomorrow the conversation thread so that you can write your questions for the Master and for myself. But until then, enjoy the rest of your day.